Arganissima, New York. Your exotic skin, hair, and beauty source, and your one-stop shop for all your natural and organic skin and hair care, featuring authentic organic Moroccan oil and prickly pear seed oil and much more. Bringing you only the best, straight from the source and proudly produced in the USA. So what are you waiting for? Shop today. Arganissima, New York. Your beauty is our duty.
Folks, welcome back to the Sales World Channel and Health Radio with your host, Hurricane H. This is a unique show, I would say, because this is a topic that I have not touched before, but it's a topic I've dabbled personally in my life with. And it is an important topic because in life, there are some necessities, and this is one of them. We cannot live without what we're going to discuss about today. What we're going to be talking about today is almost everybody's live. Everybody has one of those places that we're going to talk about. Everybody needs one, and it is live, period. I mean, it's part of it, right? So I try to be always suspenseful in the beginning of my shows, just to throw in a little bit of a suspense mode here. But I do have with me a super guest, I would say, someone who actually is changing lives and creating affordability. And now I'm going to get closer to giving you the little tip here. And he runs a company that helps people with housing solutions. There you have it. So I couldn't resist any longer, right? So I have with me Mike Kaeding. He is the president and CEO of Norhart. Mike, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Oh, by the way, one more disclosure. He does his own show too. So he has his own podcast, and he talks about his stuff all the time. And it's amazing when I get someone who actually does that. It's just exciting because in one way, first of all, it's humbling and exciting because I got to pay attention to what I'm doing here, because they know what they're doing, right? But it's just fun stuff, So again, fellow podcaster, welcome to the show. And frankly, the topic of today is really real estate, affordability, housing. And we can even connect that to the health piece of it because there is a component to that. So we're going to talk about all that stuff. But before things, as always, we want to go about your background, your story, and how you got into starting Norhart.
Yeah. Well, at a high level, what we do is we design and rent and build apartments. And really, we're focused on driving down the cost of those homes. We're already achieving about a 20 to 30% reduction in cost, but we believe we can achieve a 50% reduction. Now, imagine what that means. It means someday your rent could be half, your mortgage payment could be half. That's the kind of impact that we're hoping to make. And, originally my parents started the business. It was very small. We were building a few units every year. And I remember family outings where we'd all hop in my dad's car, drive half an hour over to the local hardware store, fill up full of materials and head on back. It was maybe a little bit, whimsical or scrappy, but we would build these buildings throughout the summer. And then during the winters, I'd be off at school. And then came the point at which I went off to college. And that was great. It was exciting. And after college, my dad really wanted me to join the family business. But honestly, I didn't want to. And the reason I didn't want to is that I didn't want people to think it was given to me. So I really wrestled with my own ego during that time. Eventually realized that what I really wanted deep down was to make some kind of meaningful, positive impact on the world. And I recognized that I could take this small business and grow it to a level that could have that kind of impact. And so that's how I got started.
That's pretty interesting story because and there was something that we can learn from that, right? Because a lot of people that, like, let's say parents who actually have their own businesses and they have children, and typically their children do not kind of partake in that business or family business. It's almost like, that's you, dad, that's you, mom, I don't want to be part of this. But then you have a percentage of people that eventually realize, like, you know what? We have a business already. Why should I work for somebody else when we can do things, here and just take it to the next level? And what happens is, because of your expertise and your college education and all the stuff, you can bring a new twist to things, like a whole new flavor to the business, because you said it. I mean, it was a mom and pop's type of, operation, but then you brought in a whole different angle with the business savvy, concepts and things like that, and the tech and all the new way of doing things, right? Cost effectiveness and all these things that we all learn in the college days, those come handy sometimes if you can apply them properly. And so for our audiences, for those people, maybe just from a business perspective, if you're going to school and your parents have a business, there's a good opportunity there. I mean, I dabble with this with my own kids, they're, like my kids are kind of like in that high school format right now. And so they have to think about the college. So we're trying to instill the idea of business, oriented, because we do have our own family stuff, and maybe you can take over because I don't want to do this for the rest of my life, that kind of thing. But it is a dabble. It's not easy to get them to change the mindset, and of course you can't force them. They have their own, path. But you did that. You kind of first no, but then yes, but then. Historically, based on what I've read, you've turned the company, to a whole different level, and you changed the way of doing things. And affordability, is a big deal, and you're doing things that are different from typical developers. And we can talk about, we're going to talk about some of that. What does a typical developer do, and how do they come up to a cost, and why is it expensive, and all this stuff, right? So again, I just wanted to highlight that piece, which is probably not the most important piece of the talk today, but it is for like some people, just as an idea. If you're listening, this is a business show pretty much, and it has to do with health, and we're going to link health to it because I always do those two things. They have to connect somehow. But the concept is that real, and also from an achievement perspective. I mean, we do inspiration, motivation, and this is inspiring to see someone who actually took the idea of their parents and developed it to the next stage. And, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, many successful empires have been built, from parents to generation to generation. And so you're building that next one. I think I don't know if you have any kids yet, but eventually maybe they'll be part of it. Who knows, right? But that's the plan. So thank you for sharing that, Mike. Now let's talk about just development in general, real estate and development. I mean, so the reason I started the show talking about something that everybody needs. I mean, it is a necessity: shelter, housing, accommodations you need to have. Otherwise, it's tough to live outside, outdoors, right? But it has been a challenge over the last few decades, and it just gotten worse and worse, especially in some areas. I'm not sure what area you're in, but for example, in the New York City area, it's expensive. In Jersey, it's expensive. Even Florida, which back in the days was like, oh, it was cheap. Now you can't even afford a place in Florida, right? So you'll have to literally go Midwest, somewhere in the middle of the nation, to probably get some cheaper, apartment or house, and maybe get a better buck for your value, right? So for your bank, it's changed a lot. But so first of all, how did you, how was it when your parents did it? And how affordable was it then based on the market? And then how the transition, how you transition to today, despite everything that's changed, you're still able to make it. And I love what you said. You want to get people to a 50% cheaper than the market. Now that's like phenomenal. I don't know how you're doing it or how you're going to do it, but I'm all ears, and I'm sure our audiences will be like, yeah, we want to know. So Mike, let's talk about that.
Yeah. So my parents actually were pretty inexpensive in their building as well, but they did it in a different way. They were scrappy, right? It was the blood, sweat, and tears. Not a very scalable model. You can't do that nationwide, but certainly functioned well for them within their sphere. After joining the business, it wasn't long after when my dad and I were working together, my dad unexpectedly passed away. And that was one of the toughest moments of my life. But looking back, that was sort of the spark. It was sort of the gem, the point at which we really started to change things. Because the reality is, I didn't really know what I was doing. I could start questioning everything. I didn't know the way things were supposed to be done. And in some regards, that was an asset. I mean, there's certainly pain and scars as a result of that, but it was also an asset. And there was no one there to tell me no. And so we just started to change things. But to give you some perspective of what we've changed to help drive down costs, at a high level, in the last 60 years, construction compared to, well, let's look at manufacturing first. They've improved labor productivity by 760%. Construction during that time period has done nearly nothing at 10%. So if we just take the lessons learned from some of these other industries and apply it to our own, we can start to have some success. For example, if construction were to produce cars, you'd have a different company installing the windshield, a different company installing the door, and a different company installing the wheel. Because in the world of construction, different companies do different parts of the project. Then, of course, the wheel company, they would call you up and say, hey, I'm so sorry. I got delayed on another project. I can't be out there for 2 weeks. So your line would be shut down. And when they did come out, the wheel company would be upset because they could only work on one car at a time, right? The world of manufacturing looks at us in construction and says, dude, you guys are nuts. So that's how things have always been done. So first thing we did, bring everything in under one roof. But once you've done that, you can start applying some very simple techniques. For example, the assembly line, right? That revolutionized manufacturing. But how in the world could you take a building and apply the assembly line thinking to it? Well, you can't take a building and drive it down the line. But what you can do is you can take the person and move them through the building. So right now, every 5 hours, all of our teams shift through the building, and every 5 hours, we complete a brand new apartment unit. And that one technique takes a project that might take 15 months and drives it down to 9.
All right, I'm just getting my head around that. I mean, as you talking, I'm picturing the whole process. I get the manufacturing, and the whole, line, where everything is being, moved down. And you're right. If one of these things stops, forget about it. It's over. And if you can, then your project, is taking longer. And the more time, the more labor, the more cost, and drives the prices up. But in what you just said, it's just amazing because if your whole team is working one apartment at a time, they go fix the next one, finish this one, as opposed to like doing structure, sheetrock, whatever,
Exactly.
electric, plumbing, and then it takes all the building before you get one unit ready, move. That one, you can probably do it. And I'm not sure if that's how you do it. And then you get people in. Maybe you work your way up from down or down up. I don't know how it's done. But the idea sounds very attractive. And it is a simple concept now that you stated it. I mean, it's hard to think about it when you're not in the business, but and it's surprisingly very effective based on what you said, because as you do that, the time frame, I mean, what I think the biggest part of the cost is, besides the material, which now more expensive than ever, the labor is expensive. So the more you spend in hours of labor, that's where you're driving your cost. Contracting, labor is expensive. So that was your idea. I'm assuming that's something that you've established based on, I guess, observation and just learning from other industries, correct?
Yeah, it's definitely just learning from others, right? Like maybe if I could give myself one superpower, I think what it is to recognize that I know very little. And if I can tap into the brain power, the best people around me in fact, like in the world, we literally fly in world experts to work with us. That accelerates things crazy. You mentioned one thing interesting, which is that labor costs are high. I'm about to say something that might shock you a little bit. We intentionally pay our people the very highest in the market. In fact, we look to find the top people in the market. And a lot of business people look at me and say, dude, you're crazy. That's really expensive. Why the heck would you do that? Well, the reason is quite simple. The best people change the game. They think about things totally differently. They drive things forward. They open doors that you didn't know could be open. And what most business leaders do not understand is that the best people outperform the average by 2 to 5 to 10 times as much. I've seen it over and over again. So instead, when you look at it on cost per unit produced, the best people are actually the most inexpensive. So for those business leaders that think they can't afford the best because it's too expensive, it is quite opposite. It's you can't afford not to have the best. And that one realization, that change of perspective, changed things also for us, growing at about 10% a year to nearly doubling in size every single year, just because of that change.
Well, so first thing is I have to just commend you for what you just said, and you don't need my my kudos here, but certainly I just want to share with you this value because spoken as a true CEO and a leader, it's not your knowledge that's key, is the people that you bring into the table, and you take that, you make that happen. I think Steve Jobs, stated something similar to that, where we hire people not to tell them what to do, but to tell us what to do. And that's the key, right? And so it's the same line, and like your thinking process is right there. And a lot of people don't see it. A true leader sees the value. I don't have to know everything. I just need to surround myself with the best of the best. And you said it. If you have the best, they're effective, they're efficient, they move quicker, they'll do things differently and faster, and they'll think of new ways of making things. You may not get the best. And again, we know this. You buy cheap stuff, it breaks. You want that buy it 3 times, 4 times, and you just waste the money. You buy one good thing and it stays for years. And that's the same concept here. The labor can shift from one level to the other. And then the result can be not only effective, top of the line, but also it will be quality. And that's the other part, because you do want to have a quality product at the end of the day. So thank you for doing that. And I think that's a message also for any aspiring leaders out there. It's a lesson learned, from the best. The idea is that you cannot possibly be a leader knowing that this is me, I know everything, you got to do what I say. You have the vision, you have the leadership, you're going to guide people, right? That's the mission. However, these folks have to buy into it, but you have to allow them to bring into the table what you might not be able. You don't have engineering, you don't have this, you don't have that, but you can get the best of the best and get them. And if you pay for the talent, you will get more. It's very simple. You get qualified people, super qualified people. You're going to get the highest end of anything. You get, maybe new. Listen, nothing wrong with a newbie or just somebody that's learning, but it's learning. It's, maybe you don't, in a business like yours, you can't afford, time is everything. You have a project that starts and ends. And if you double up the time, you're just wasting. And then you can provide the service and the product, in your case here, affordable housing. And that's a big deal. So thank you for sharing that. Now, I want to go back to just the construction of property in general. Yeah. I mean, you have a couple of things. You have the land, and that's one way. You have to acquire land, obviously, or maybe buy some old properties and, can just crush them down and destroy everything and rebuild. I mean, that's one piece. That's part, that you can do. I mean, I'm not sure what locations you're in, and you mentioned something worldwide, but maybe you can guide us through, like, where do you actually service, where you provide your buildings, your housing projects and development, that can give us some guidance. And then the idea is that, for example, you had houses that were built, I don't know, 80s, 90s, maybe 2000, right? And the houses then and today are probably the same size, let's say taking the same buildings, but yet the cost has quadrupled. Everything that we used to buy, I'm just going to give an example. You go to Home Depot, the stuff that you bought 5 years ago is almost triple, quadruple. I mean, we're talking about inflation. That's been there already. I mean, it's amazing. And the raw materials, the stuff that you use for construction, is also expensive. So it changes the dynamics. Now, in a world where everything is high cost, your formula is still maintaining on a low side, in the delivery. And that's the amazing part, and I love your ideology, your concept itself. Like, I can still do this and, provide the best. I mean, it's like cars, right? You get the best, most efficient car. I mean, I have to say the Japanese did the best, good job about that, right? They produce top line stuff for very competitive stuff compared to the US back in years back. Now I think we're catching up to that, right? But when Honda and all these guys, Toyotas, I mean, they came up, with these products, they were like, oof, how do we compete with that market? I mean, but we were able to actually catch up to them in the US. But it's the same concept here that you have. And by the way, the other thing is that you're not the only game. I mean, there's developers all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you also compete in the world where it's very competitive? So those are my questions, and I'll shut down for a minute and allow you to elaborate on those.
Yeah. Okay. A bunch of questions there. The first, I think, was related to where we're at. We're currently have properties in Minnesota. We have some manufacturing capabilities in Minnesota and Wisconsin. We're expanding our properties right now into Texas. We're expanding our manufacturing capabilities into Mexico. And about 15% of our staff are actually international. Uh, then on to supply chain and materials. You're right, materials have gone up quite a bit. And in fact, you talked about housing going up. I think the really interesting metric is housing compared to income. And when you look at that, housing costs have risen faster than income over the last few decades, right?
Income hasn't risen.
What was that?
I said income hasn't risen, man. I don't think people have gotten more money. Everything else went up, but not the income. So it's a real fact.
It's I don't know, it's unconscionable. Like at the rate this is changing, like we're going to be putting a ton of money into housing alone. And so if we can solve this, it has such a big impact on everyone. But then we run into things like the fact materials are going way up in cost. So what are we doing there? We hit by the same problems. In fact, at the beginning of COVID, lumber went way up and all resin went way up. We couldn't even get certain supplies and materials. And we said, enough is enough. We can't deal with this anymore. So a couple of things. One is we started building on our entire own supply chain. So now we actually contract directly with manufacturers, China, the United States, and Mexico, and we have our own team that handles the shipments and the supplies directly into our sites. So we're in a lot of ways, we're our own warehousing and distribution channels that we built up. And then secondly is manufacturing. So we've started now manufacturing wall panels. We get steel coils that come in one end of the factory and out the other are completed exterior wall panels and interior wall panels, like with siding and vapor barrier, all completed. We started doing precast concrete. These are giant beams and columns that go into buildings. And that's only expanding. And we'll expand into that as far as we need to if we feel that the manufacturing costs have gotten out of hand and that we can do it more inexpensively. So we're a bit tenacious. We tackle a problem. We're a bit fearless. It's not always a good thing. We got some scars from steel coil and precast concrete, but in the end, it's a better thing for the consumer.
So thank you, Mike. Well, that's impressive because, and it's logical and innovative because in a way you cut a lot of middlemen in the process. You went from like maybe 4 steps, to like, you're it. You go, you get, you're done. And that in itself, can save a lot of money. So therefore you can bring that cost down. And, you are also innovative in terms of creating some materials yourself and building blocks, basically your own way, as opposed to relying on what's in the marketplace and waiting for that to happen. If something happens, you also opened up to outside markets where you can get your own supplies and you have backups. You got China, you got Mexico. I mean, one is too far, one is too close. This one closes, you got something going on here. The other thing you mentioned, which is a lot of your labor is international. Did I get that right?
15%, but yeah.
15%. Okay, so not a lot, but percentage of it. Now, you said something about the top, and it's funny because there's talent all over the world.
Yeah.
And sometimes we don't realize. And now, of course, some people say, well, we're in the US, you got to build America and there's nothing wrong with that. You got another, 75% or 85% of your labor that is local, but you're getting different ideas. And by the way, I've seen something similar in Dubai. So in Dubai, they have talent from every single part of the world. I mean, they have nations, from everywhere. There's some representation. And in these projects, they have people from all over, and even their styles, the way they come up with things, they're taking the best of everybody's. From the US, from Canada, from Europe, from China, from Japan, from Australia, anywhere in the world, they get in the best of the best, whether it's, engineering, architecture, design, manufacturing, building, skills, talent, it's all there. Very similar concept. You're bringing that and diversifying the talent, and you're learning because also the techniques of buildings are different in other parts of the world. So you get in some of that because we have a different way of building here that maybe in Europe, I mean, it's concrete, most of it. There is less wood and things like that. I don't know if you've moved 100% to like European style, but it seems like you're doing a little hybrid stuff there. But it's changing. Now you said Minnesota. Now you're going in Texas, and so those are the main hubs right now in terms of your
Yes.
construction.
Yep.
Now someone can say, well, it's not expensive in Minnesota compared to, for example, a Jersey or New York or maybe California. You can do that. But I'm sure that even within the same marketplace, you are still beating the competition. Am I getting that right?
Yeah. When we look at the costs, we compare apples to apples. So we're looking at comparable Minnesota properties, not New York, because that would be easy to beat in Minnesota. The one interesting thing I often get at this point is people look at our properties and say, Mike, your rents, they're no different than any other rents in the marketplace. What the heck? Like, you talk about affordable housing and they're the same price. And ultimately that's intentional, but why? See, our goal long-term is to solve housing affordability nationwide. And if we were to lower rents today, that would be great. We'd solve it for a few thousand people. That's awesome. But really, we want to start pouring the profits, or we are pouring the profits that we make from these properties into building the system that builds housing. Elon Musk talks about how it's hard to produce a car, but it is 10 to 100 to 1,000 times harder to produce the system that builds cars. That's what we're building. And I talk about all these plants and stuff we're bringing online. We're building that whole infrastructure to drive down the costs. And our dream is to scale up to a point in the next 10 years that we're producing 60,000 units per year and have 192,000 units under management. At that point, we're starting to provide enough units so that we are driving down the cost of housing, not just for our own residents, for everyone nationwide, because of that supply we're providing. And that's really how you solve housing affordability sustainably for the nation and without government support.
Well, great set strategy. I mean, you're certainly not overpriced. You're in the same market, spend, but you're using that variable number, whatever, the little high, level to reinvest it in the bigger structure that eventually will allow you to do more and, really open up. And as you go bigger, you have enough units, you have enough, I guess, revenue to really be able to scale things down and obviously make the cost affordable. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
All right. So now your culture, your business, I like your thinking. You're very progressive, very contemporary, and futuristic in your way of thinking. And again, from a leadership stand, for me, just a management, and just being out there leading a new way of doing things. I mean, because construction in general hasn't been very corporate, if you want to call it that way. I mean, it's not, you sound more like a corporate culture than the typical contracting deal or development deal. Now, of course, there are different companies that have different levels and whatever you want to call it, but I hear a true corporate structure with a different culture of employment, diversity is in there, quality is in there, innovation in there, so it's all the stuff. So what do you do to really get your staff, your teams to really buy into the concept and drive with you to the next level?
Such a good question. When we talk about our strategies as a company, the number one most important strategies to me, we only have 3, is all about culture. It's about creating a place that people can love where they work. And if you don't get that right, if you don't get the culture and the people right, it doesn't really matter. You won't get anything else at the level you're hoping to do. And so I think the number one most important part of that is hiring the best people, right? If you hire amazing people, they create an incredible culture, but that's not enough in and of itself. For us, we define what that culture looks like. And we spell it out. What's our purpose? What's our mission? What's our values? What's our strategies? What's our goals, habits, and beliefs? That's our whole realm of stuff. And I do every single orientation. So every week we have a new batch of recruits, and I'm in there and I share that right from me to everyone. We do follow-up orientations where a month or two later, they all come back and they say, here's what it actually is like. We have another deeper dive conversation on that. We have things like annual meetings with every single team that meets up and discusses and figures out, okay, what's been going on within the group and how do we move things forward? We do engagement surveys every 6 months. And this one's actually kind of fun. A lot of companies do engagement surveys, but in part of that survey is so we're not part of a nationwide survey, but there's a super secret part that doesn't get sent to anyone unless requested. And even so, it goes only to the CEO. That part of the survey is the CEO's results. It's my results. Well, guess what? When we go through our results, what is the first thing that we share with everyone? It's my results. In fact, we not only share all those results openly to our staff, but this past year, we actually went a step further. And now you can go to our website and you can read our results for yourself. And it's not all pretty, right? There's comments in there that are negative, and you can read all the gooey good stuff for yourself if you want. But what I tell our team is I don't want us to be fake good, right? I don't want us to pretend to be something we're not. I want to be honest with where we're at, have a real conversation about it, because that is the first step to meaningful improvement. And so we go through that every 6 months. And I was just at an engagement meeting this afternoon, talking with their staff about their results on their team, learning the feedback that they had from me. And I there's some good stuff in there that I now get to take away with and work to improve on.
Well, so let's talk about that, because that is powerful. Again, coming from you as the lead, it's not very common to find an open leader that's willing to take the critics and take in the feedback. That takes a high different level of personality to be able to absorb that. And I love what you said. You are not an absentee CEO. You are an active CEO. You are out there. I mean, you probably do some golf. I don't know, but you are literally you're in the trenches with the teams and you're doing orientations. I mean, I have not seen. Maybe I have in one example, an orientation where a CEO walked in, at least in my world, and they kind of talked a little bit about stuff. Typically, they're not, at that level. They don't come down to that level where you are with the newbies, right? Or the new recruits. It's different. You're changing, and that's a new wave of thinking. That's actually progressive thinking, making it different. And yes, hey, surveys, bring it on. Good, the bad, the ugly. Let's talk about it, right? It's okay. And of course, you can work on things, and we all need improvements. We all have to improve, otherwise, it's the end, right? So sometimes we don't see everything. You said it. I don't know it all. I need to get, maybe now. Sometimes the feedback can be just negative for its sake, and that's okay too. It happens, But the idea, there's the good and the bad, and there's a mixture in there, and you take the best of it. But a lot also, it's open. It's not like you're not hiding. There's no secret. There's no hidden agenda. It's all in the clear. It's all public. It's open, and you're changing. So now that takes me to a question about the lack of talent these days. And I know you're doing good, but have you been experiencing what almost everybody else is experiencing nationwide, which is
absolutely.
Talent, acquisition has been very difficult. Finding people, finding the right ones, finding like reliable folks to work, or people that are willing to actually put the time and learn. It's becoming almost a hard commodity to come by. It's difficult to find folks today. You can put everybody. I mean, if you talk to any recruiting agency or any recruiter or any company that has positions open, positions are like literally stagnating. I mean, they're just out there. Very few people. Sometimes people are not qualified. People they're qualified, maybe they don't even show up to interviews. I've had those experiences myself. Or you hire them, there's a start date, they don't even show up on the start date. Have you and this literally increased tremendously after the pandemic. Now, have you experienced the same? And if yes, what are some of the measures that you may be using that can change things differently?
Yeah, we were experiencing the same thing. And I would talk to a lot of business leaders, and the feeling I got is people kind of just complain about it, right? They post something on Indeed, maybe bringing a recruiter here and there, but like I'm not getting the people I need. There's just no good people out there. And we kind of sat down with our team and we said, dude, we don't want to be complainers. Like we can find a solution to this. How do we solve the problem? And our solution at the time, we were about 100 people at that point, is that we hired 14 recruiters on staff. That was the measure. So we increased our staff by 15% and they were all recruiters. Sounds insane, but that allowed us to take up our hiring to levels that no companies around us were doing. Because honestly, if we really wanted the best, they're not looking for a job, right? They will not come to your Indeed post. They will not look for you. They're not going to come to you. You have to go to them. So we hired on a whole team to go search and identify the best people at other companies, work to build relationships with them over time, and then reel them on in when we had the right job opening for them, right? A totally different perspective. And it was painful to get that started. But once that started rolling, we now have really, we still struggle with certain positions, but it is night and day different. And it enabled us to get amazing people.
So, well, that's first of all, I again, another command here, another kudos for it. Again, you're innovative, so there's a solution. You're gonna find what is not happening, and I'm gonna do the other way. I'm gonna challenge, the gimmicks. I'm gonna make it different. The average, company may have a couple of recruiters. You went crazy, because that's all what mattered at that time. You need to focus. That's because without staffing, you're not gonna be able to move things, right? So, that's where you put. It's like the body, right? When there is a pain somewhere, all the immune system goes to that area to actually work it, right? That's exactly, you put all the stuff, all your asset in the pain mode, to try to make sure that pain is no longer there, and hopefully it goes away. And exactly what you did. So you change the dynamics there. Now that you were able to do this, a question for you: do you see that ultimately you're looking for talent with expertise? Were you open to maybe bringing talent with zero expertise that you will mold yourself? I mean, is that part of the strategy?
Absolutely. Yeah, it depends on the position. We want the best people for the role. And so if there's a role that needs expertise, we're going to hire that expertise. It's just not, you have to. Like a precast concrete foreman that's implementing new precast facility, they've got to know what they're doing. But our measure isn't so much an expertise. Our measure is the values, how well you align with their values. But secondly, are you on a journey to become best in the world at what you do? As a company, we want to be best in the world. This is literally the goal, to be best in the world at building and managing apartments. And we can't do that as a company unless we have people, individuals who are becoming best in the world at their little niche. So it's really about, you can be brand new, but do we see you having the capability, the willingness, and the passion to get to a point that you're the Tiger Woods, or you're the Michael Jordan, or you're the Tom Brady, you're the best in the world at what you're doing? As long as you're on that trajectory, as long as you're pushing yourself to that kind of level, then awesome, you're in the right spot. But if you're not, there's many other great places to work. We're just not the right fit.
Love it. Well, again, you got this down to a real science, and you make it, really at the next level. Now we talked about supply chain, creativity, building your own stuff, talent acquisition, maintaining the best thing, and being very different in the way you do things and very progressive. Now, there are things that you might now not have control over, or maybe you do, and that's my next question. Is the finances of people. We talked about how, incomes have not gone up, but the cost has gone up. And you are doing housing, both rentals and property sales, right? You do sales, I'm assuming.
Rentals.
Only rentals?
Yes, only rentals.
Oh, okay. So I thought actually there's some developments where people can buy in, like, co-ops, condos. So I guess that I'll stand corrected. Now I guess that, there's no finance in there, and there's no, I'm not sure if do you have programs, any special things that you have in terms of the rental, or just basically the standard stuff?
Yeah, it's a It's standard from a financial perspective. We do a lot to provide lifestyle and experience and creating almost a resort style feel for our residents. But we are, you talk about finances overall, we are impacted by things, right? We're not immune to the world around us. We get hit and we have to dodge and move and pivot. And an example of that is, our projects we've typically financed with debt or with bank loans. And in fact, if we had $100 million building, typically a bank would fund us at about $75 million or 75%. That's great because our costs are lower. So our costs are actually less than the bank financing, which is a great place to be. We actually generate cash with each project, which is unheard of in our industry. But interest rates have been rising, right? Which means that loan proceeds, or the amount of loans that banks will give you, have gone down. So now they're not giving us 75 million, maybe they're giving us 55 million. So now we have to pivot, we have to change. But that's okay. That's life, right? And so our pivot to that is then we ended up launching a totally new investment platform to sort of replace the bank. It gives everyday people access to investing with us in ways that actually many real estate deals don't even offer. We went through an extreme process with the SEC to get approval to allow any person in the country to invest with their platform. And the platform feels a lot like a bank, but it's not.
Is that like Point?
What was that?
It's like similar to Point.
I'm not familiar with Point.
Yeah, it sounds like it, and I can elaborate on it. But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you. I thought that was your thing.
Yeah. So it feels a lot like a bank, but let me be very clear: it's not a bank. We're not FDIC insured, so there is risk involved. Although we do take steps to mitigate that risk for people. But what's awesome is you get a high interest rate with your accounts, and you can pull your money out, or you can lock it up for different periods. But that was our pivot. That was our change to the reality that the world around us is changing.
Again, talking about creativity, and that's what makes the difference between true success and not success. You're adaptable, you're malleable, you're constantly changing and shifting based on the circumstances and updating your stuff. You're like version 10 versus version, caught in V1, right? You're like, every time the new edition comes on, you're in there, you're like upgraded. And that's a huge difference in terms of like how the thought process. And by the way, this is not necessarily just for your concept of real estate or development. For all business, if you're not, progressive and adapting with the times and changing, and if you're just about profit, but not adapting and investing and reinvesting and changing dynamics, you might eventually lose things. But you are doing it in a way that you are always ahead of the curve. And as soon as you see something, you come up with creative ways to actually make up the difference and still be, in a way where you're profitable and be able to even have extra margins to do more. And that's actually excellent, right? So you talked about the effect. Now, do you have any fears with how the banking is going right now? I mean, there's a lot of talk out there about potentially crashes and this and that. And again, I'm not, it just we hear this stuff. The echo is out there. Some of it is real, some of it is not real. I mean, we've been through a recession. I mean, maybe you call it like 2008, whatever crash there, and there's something looming that sounds like it. Every now and then you hear about a bank system that is collapsing and closing or something. How do you feel about that? I mean, because to your point, I mean, there's a majority of your finances coming from the banks.
Yeah, it is a point of concern for me. What we're finding right now is that a number of banks are lending less than they have before, partly because of the availability of funds isn't quite the way it used to be. The Wall Street Journal actually interviewed us recently on this, and the interesting point I was sharing with them is that we had lots of deposits in banks, right? Millions of dollars in just sitting in bank accounts. And one thing that we knew, but maybe didn't know as deeply as we should have, is that your funds are only insured up to 250,000, right?
Yeah, I see.
So what we've been doing now is pulling our money out of banks and putting it into government bonds, because now that's backed by the U.S. government. Although there's the debt ceiling issue right now, there's maybe no perfectly safe place to go. But But yeah, I think we're not the only ones.
Very
Silicon
cool.
Valley Bank collapse. That was essentially what happened. A bunch of big businesses pulled their money out, and I think some banks are feeling the pinch of that. Do I think it's going to have a huge economic ripple through the economy? Probably not, but I think it's certainly a downturn in some ways right now because of that.
But it sounds that you're already, ahead of the game, and you have your ideology and your ideas are there, and you're trying to manage your portfolio correctly, so you're not running out of liquidity. Because I think
Yeah.
that's the worst part is like, because at the end of the day, your bank money is only digits in the account. I mean, you cannot pull it in one day. I mean, even if you wanted to, probably you can't, especially if you're talking millions, right? And to your point, if something happens, 250,000, I mean, you'll have to have like, hundreds of accounts, to just kind of do that and manage all that. That's a pain. So it is a tough place to be, regardless how you play it, right? So now let's talk about your developments. I don't know. I have not seen them personally, but I have a vision that they're different, you know,
Mm.
in terms of, like you said, it has the feel of a community, has that. And a lot of developments do have that. But is there anything different about yours that actually makes them very attractive?
Yeah, one really simple thing, and this is a new change for us, but why are apartment buildings, even if it's by the same company, all like separate entities, right? All these different properties out there, but you go to hotels and it's a branded experience between all the buildings you go to. So one of the things we've been changing now is that our buildings are like Norhart Oakdale, Norhart Cottage Grove, and you just get a certain kind of experience. Well, our head designer. So Steve Jobs announces the iPhone in 2007. He walks off stage, and our head designer walks on stage following Steve Jobs' announcement. That kind of level of person, and he is rethinking that experience for residents. It's got a totally different flair and feeling to it, which is really cool. Our newest property that I was just touring this morning, it's on a brand new transit line, the Gold Line. There's a stop right at the front door. The main entryway is 2 stories tall, and the entire width of the building, it's utterly massive. It has a restaurant, coffee shop, co-working space, thousands of square feet of amenity space, including a spa and a sauna, a pool in the kind of almost like a rooftop area. And then actually on the main rooftop, there's a patio and grill with a view of the downtown skyline. There's penthouse suites, which are just gorgeous, 22-foot high ceilings, floor to ceiling windows. It is incredible what they're putting together. It's just fun to see.
See, I want to see now. I'm gonna definitely go in and check out some of those buildings.
Yeah, go look
Yeah.
at Norhart Oakdale. That's where the new stuff's at.
Oh, listen, it sounds amazing, and now I know that you probably do this because you have to. Is that you also have your own real estate, agent crew group? You're not doing it with others. You have your own team that does the rentals and the property
Yeah.
management and stuff. I mean, you're a one-stop shop. I mean, I get the concept. You're like from soup to nuts, from inception
From dirt to
to
key.
exactly. Here we go. It's a one, but that's great. And I'm sure other developments do similar stuff. Because I mean, I've seen those concepts. But again, it just like somehow it sounds more like futuristic, different.
Mm.
It's new, it's newer. It's like cutting edge kind of concept. And so what are some of the challenges that you'll find right now in terms of that portion? Is like, okay, so you have the buildings. I'm assuming that you're pretty much getting some of the tenants locked down before they even get the key, right? Before you even actually open the doors, or you just wait until it's already you get a demo. How does that work for you guys?
Yeah. Right now with our new buildings opening up, Norhart Oakdale, I think last I looked had a 200-person waiting list. We're still like 9 months open from opening. It's crazy. Blows my mind.
That's good. That's good news. That's good stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's been fun. I think as far as challenges, I think the biggest challenge that we're facing right now is scale, right? As you scale up, it is really hard to scale up effectively. You can double your workforce, but that doesn't mean you double productivity. In fact, in some cases, you can add people to a team and the team gets less productive. So we are navigating that sphere. I think very tangibly, one of the interesting challenges is we're taking this cycle time, the amount of time it takes us to produce, or how many how often we produce a brand new apartment unit. Right now it's 5 hours. I want to drive that down to 2 hours, 1 hour, 10 minutes, 5 minutes. That would be amazing, right?
Time. Did you say 5 hours?
Yeah, every 5 hours.
You go to an apartment. Done.
Yeah, well, it's like a Toyota. They have a new car coming off the line every 55 seconds. We have a new apartment unit coming off our line every 5 hours.
Listen. This is new because I don't know if any other developer is doing that. I'm sorry, maybe they are. And by the way, if they are, I challenge them to come on and just share with us their story. But I'm sure you'll be interested in learning as well. But the concept that you're saying, I mean, when you talked about moving the teams one unit at a time, I mean, 5 hours was not in my radar. I was thinking maybe it takes a couple of days, a week, whatever, to get through a full apartment. I mean, to really get it all done. I mean, you must have like teams of hundreds of people working. I don't know. I mean, how does that work? It's like a hive, like bees all over the place. Everything is happening at the same time. You got pages, you got this, you got that. How do you do that? I mean, that is amazing. I mean, it's like there's like one comes in, walls, plumbing, electric, this. I mean, I can just see like the teams coming in and out, one at the other. Like everybody's doing one thing at the time. Because some things you have to have first before you have. You can't finish before you get all the stuff. You need an installation. So you're going to have people doing things, but 5 hours. I mean, and you're talking about like even scaling down. I mean, like, shrinking that to, it's amazing. I have no words for that.
It is fun to watch because we have a factory that gets loads of steel coil. This is just big rolls of coil. And within 5 hours, that team has produced all the wall panels for a unit. It's shipped off to the unit or to the building. And as the truck is arriving, the crane then picks up the walls, puts them all in place. And there's several trucks worth. And then within 5 hours, all the walls are built and the floor is set. And now they move up to the next unit, right? It's just this constant flow of work going on. As soon as the walls are set, electricians are in, or I think it's plumbers. Plumbers are in behind them doing all the plumbing work. Then the electricians 5 hours later are doing their work. It's just a flow through the building.
Yeah, I mean, and again, it is cutting edge, as I stated. It is innovative. It is really, you are able to manage the system, as you said, to create a system where it's efficient. You optimize everything. There's no wasted, there's no waste. And you prefab stuff, they're ready, like panels are ready to go. Boom, zap, done. Next. And that's, and you move in as the next apartment is doing. It's like, like a wave, like wave 1, wave 2, wave 3, and they're going through the apartments. Next unit. And that's like amazing how I mean, for people watching and listening, I don't know if you can visualize what I'm talking about here, but it sounds like, it's literally like, to your point, you talked about, that whole chain where, you pass everything to the next level. Boom, 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 boom. This is happening, in real time, but you're talking buildings. It's not like, you're passing boxes here. You're talking about building that is being built and constructed, one piece at a time. And every 5 hours, have a new unit. And then by the time you get to the third floor, that first floor is probably done already. Am I getting that picture right?
Yeah. We actually have to finish up to the roof before the first floor can be done because you have to have a roof. but basically, you've got the right concept. It's exactly what we're trying to do. And it's incredibly hard. Holy moly. It's one of the most challenging things we've done because think about all the pieces of that puzzle have to come together at just the right time. And if any one piece fails, the whole thing fails. It just falls apart quickly. Even handling the material flow, we have these big tents on site. And so you get these large deliveries coming in. And then within those tents, the teams are kitting all the materials that you need for that unit. And then those materials in that kit get delivered to your unit right before you need it. So then you have the materials there to do your work. So you never need to like race off the site. So it's a lot of logistics is what it is.
It is. It's a logistical nightmare, I would say, but yeah. you made it into a nice dream.
Yeah.
So here's the thing, though. Like, I'm sure you have backup plans because what if something happens? What if a truck is not able to make it? What are some contingencies that you have? Of course, I don't want you to share some of the secret stuff, that the secret sauce, but certainly like the big lines. I mean, there's got to be a backup system like contingency plan B, C, and you because the only way for you to optimize everything is you have to always have, nothing can stop. This stops, you have, plan B goes in effect, boom. And that's really thinking efficiently and optimizing the process. That's not for everyone, and never definitely not in construction.
Yeah. So it's at its heart, it's just being clever and thoughtful. And it's really about getting your team to be clever and thoughtful and think those problems, having a culture of continuous improvement. To give you some examples, so framers, they're out in the elements, right? We're in Minnesota, we have weather issues. And so what we can do is you can look at historical weather reports and you can say, okay, here's how often we get cold days that's too hard to work. Here's how often it's too windy or too snowy and there's rain. Okay, based upon that volatility, you can actually measure it out using statistics. How much of a buffer does that team need? And so there we've measured it out and we know how many batches that team has to be ahead so that they can deal with a 100-year kind of event. And then what they actually do within the week is that team works 4 days a week and they don't know the day off they're going to get during that week. And so they might find that the weather day is on Wednesday. So they work Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. But if it's a good week, they work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. If it's a really terrible week, they may only work Monday and Tuesday, but they built up a buffer to eat into for that terrible week. And then they build it up over the next few weeks.
You factor in all the different challenges that are even nature,
exactly,
which is impressive. Now, here's the good news is that's Minnesota, but you go to Texas, that problem is not as
Although I hear the heat is pretty bad, so we'll see.
Well, it's hard, but I mean, yeah. Listen, I mean, you can get tank tops, you can get shirtless, whatever, and you can get a nice breeze, fans, whatever. It's not the same, dude. I mean, the heat, you probably can bear it a little differently than you can still work in the heat. You're just gonna have to hydrate more and stuff. Now let's talk about since we're talking about elements now, safety issues, OSHA, all these things. How do you and buildings and permits? That's a nightmare for any developer. I mean, and it's reality because you have to deal with townships, municipalities, building, planning boards and all this stuff. It's not a picnic. I mean, you have to have, some real, relationships because that stuff needs to be like, clockworks and these guys. And to your point, if you make one mistake, I mean, I can just imagine you have the plumbing, you have the electricians, you have to get permits, everything. They have to get approved before you can close everything and seal everything and move to the next one. This stuff has got to be happening in real time. How do you even tackle that? That's a tough one.
Yeah. So going through cities is really a challenge because the neighborhood gets a lot of power over what you do, which is good. You get a lot of people that maybe don't always have the most productive complaints. It really fundamentally is, I don't like change, right? I can totally understand legitimate issues and let's work through them together. But if they're just fighting back because they don't want change, like how do you wrestle through that? So we have a whole team that works through those things. I've been to many city council meetings. It's always the same sort of issues. It's concerned with traffic. It's concerned with, not my backyard, building height, exactly. All that stuff.
Yeah, I can't see the sun anymore.
Yeah. Which is interesting because a lot of times their buildings are far away from people. Yeah. And then there's also a part of it too, which is, what are you going to do for me? The fact that you're now in our neighborhood, right? So introducing new tax benefits for people and bringing new parks and benefits into the community is always a part of it. We've gone through city council meetings where we had full support from the staff, entire support from the planning commission, and we get to the city council meeting and like one or two city council members are like, oh, no, I just don't want a building there. What? Go through all this work, hundreds of thousands of dollars of planning, and like the last stage, they just don't want it. So then it's over because the city council is just the neighbors, just like anyone else. So that politics is always a real challenge, but I'm just glad we now have it. I don't have to do that much anymore, and I have a team that does it for me.
Yeah, but they still have to go through the motions, right? It's still tough. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, listen, I've those planning council, meetings and things like that, and the board and all those things, they could be tough. And again, they look at everything like, we're not seeing the skylight, we're not seeing the sun, you're kind of ruining my view, whatever. They start talking about all these things, that below, and they start like throwing terminology that's like, and we have to deal with that. It's tough. Now, but for let's say you have all that stuff and you're building, we still gotta get through the permits, And listen, some townships, in the States can be very difficult when it comes to approving, and many people, sometimes they linger in a project for months because they haven't gotten an approval, or like someone comes in, yeah, that wire needs to be redone, and then now you have to tear off everything. That's probably a very bad you know piece of the work. Now, the way you sound, the way this is working, you don't have any error, margins, because if you did, your project cannot continue. Your chain is going to be really, on halt, and really stopped. So how do you mitigate that?
It's not that we don't have problems. The key for us is that we've got enough problem solvers to handle the problems as they arise, right?
All right, I like
That I think is, and if we have no problems, then we're not growing. So no, I'm always kind of gauging a sense of how many problems we have coming in the organization. I think with repetition, helps reduce problems. We built so many buildings now that the team, the people, myself, we know the codes that many jurisdictions are going to bring up, have concerns with, and we've already built that into our system. So when they get out there, they're not as nervous about stuff. And plus, too, when you've got a well-built system, and the city official comes out there, they have a sense of peace, and they don't come and check as much. When I first started out, holy moly, they did not trust me. And they were out looking at every nook and cranny because they didn't think I was going to do anything right. So that it's a process you have to go through to get to that later stage.
You earned your rank. I mean, you earned your respect, and the quality speaks for itself. I mean, you've been doing this for long enough that there's no complaints about like the building has got issues, you got problems, you got this, you got that. If you have constant complaining about the structures, whatever, then these guys are not going to be happy. But everything is peachy, everything is good, then the chances are they're going to make sure they're going to look at what they have to look at, and that's it. They sign off, done, next. Because you have to deal with that. Those are the things. I mean, during construction and post construction, to get one of those of occupancy certificates, that's a problem, right? You got to make sure they come in and check and do all their stuff, and especially when you got to have tenants, and there's all that stuff that needs to happen. Then you have to, even in the construction, you have also to work with utilities, and you have to work with all the stuff that's in the township to make sure that it's all done correctly. So that's a nightmare on its own, but I'm sure you've evolved to a level where you have that under, Now let's talk about expansion. I know you're talking about Texas. I mean, your concept can really expand, east, west, north, south. I mean, I think you're going further south right now, but is there, any vision in the next decade to really just go 50? I think you mentioned something, but like any next moves that we should be aware of?
Yeah, in the next decade, we're hoping to reach 192,000 units under management with a 60,000 unit per year pace. That is likely going to be a dozen or two dozen states at that stage. And what's exciting about that, once we get to that kind of level, that's when we can start having a meaningful impact on housing supply in many communities, and hopefully can start seeing prices come down.
So let's talk about that just for a brief moment and come into the hour here. What drives the cost? I mean, I know there's all this stuff that we talked about, but like, how do you come up with a rental fee? Is it like, because when you buy, you do the comparison, right? 3 properties, you do all the appraisal stuff, right? Like market comparison. But in rentals, how do you do that? You have a new building. And there's no building like yours. So how do you come up with a nice value price that is affordable? Or even if it's not, I mean, obviously if you have a penthouse, you got the view, you're probably going to have the higher rent, So is there anything that goes into that decision?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, we could talk hours on just this one topic. We actually found literally the world expert at this very question, and we flew them out. We pled with them to come out here, flew them out, and we spent days with them. It was amazing. At its simplest point, it's really about supply and demand. What we measure is we measure the number of people renting. Well, okay, before you have rentals, you look at comparisons and you make adjustments based upon what you think. Like, oh, that one has a pool, mine doesn't, mine should be priced a little bit less, right? That sort of thing. But that's sort of basic pricing. The more advanced pricing is you start looking at the flow and demand for your units coming in compared to the outflow of people moving out. And you do a lot of math to balance those two out. And then if demand is higher than supply, you raise pricing up to lower demand. And if demand is lower than supply, you bring pricing back and put those in balance. So you're constantly basically predicting supply and demand and trying to adjust price to balance the two.
Oh, it's always that rule. Demand drives everything, right? And again, inventory. If there's a need, your price is going to hike. If there is plenty, you got to bring it down so you can actually in those units. But now let's say your buildings are completely different from the surrounding areas. So ultimately, there's got to be a little bit of a, when again, even here, if you get into a nice neighborhood, a nice, development, I mean, the cost is definitely different from others because that's the price you pay for that particular prestige, if you want to call it that, right? So I know that's probably a good factor to consider. I mean, you want to live this life. Well, like you said, the amenities on their own, I mean, cost money. And so you're giving them a whole different experience and therefore they pay for that. I mean, it's like having an exclusive community. It costs money to have that. And so now that's the standard. Now in your buildings, on your structural developments, do you have different levels, meaning like some are high luxury type versus some more like medium level? How does that, configure with you?
Yeah, we have we call them series. So a series 1 property, granite countertops, stainless steel appliances, well finished property, very good. Tends to be a little bit older for us, but nice. A series 2 is when you start getting into some more significant amenities like a coffee shop or a sky lounge or movie room. That sort of thing also comes into play. In most of our older stock, they're either series 1 or series 2. Our newer stock now is that elevated experience, that almost resort style experience. That's what we call a series 3. And that is what Norhart Oakdale is and future projects are. And even within a property, you have a variety, right? You've got a small studio with a bad view, which is the lower end. And then you have a huge 2-story penthouse suite that's on the top of the building that has views of Minneapolis and St. Paul. That's going to be more expensive, right? So there's a spread within each building as well.
So I don't know if it's shareable, but what is the average price, for a, let's say, 3-bedroom, apartment?
Yeah, in the ballpark of $1,800-$1,900. It can be as much as $2,400 or even less than that whole range. But
that's it. I'm moving. I'm moving.
Yeah, well, there you go. Well, you're in New York, right? So
yeah, man,
it's really expensive in New York.
Oh yeah, I mean, you can't even get a studio for that price.
Oh well, there you go. It's cheap.
Yeah. See, like, again, I mean, obviously location, but you're talking about a nice, area with a beautiful view. I mean, minus the weather, I think that's the only thing that would not. But now you're going to Texas. That may be a discussion.
Yeah.
So whereabouts in Texas are you guys starting?
Yeah. So Dallas Fort Worth.
Nice.
On the north side is a city called Denton. It's kind of interesting because here in Minnesota, so Highway 35, for those of you who don't know, is the only freeway in the country that has the 35W and 35E split, right? Every other freeway, they end numbers. They don't do W and E. Well, it's interesting. It happens twice, once in Minnesota, once in Texas. And the northern split in Minnesota is a city called Forest Lake. That's where I'm at right now. The northern split in Texas is a city called Denton. We did not plan it that way, but we're essentially duplicating what we're doing in a very similar geographic kind of environment in Texas.
Well, beautiful. But again, I'm assuming. Well, Texas is still affordable, and there's good
Yeah.
taxes. There's good stuff there. So it's definitely and it is a different state in terms of politics, I would say.
Yeah.
So that can probably be more of an advantage. I mean, because I tell you, I mean, in Jersey, and yeah, I'm right outside New York, but Jersey is probably one of the most difficult, in terms of
Oh,
tax and housing and everything. So it's just not the same. Now, I don't know if you'll ever be in Jersey or New York, but hey,
yeah, I have.
no, not physically. I'm talking about
Oh,
as a project, as to develop out here. But
oh,
uh,
well, maybe someday.
maybe someday, right? Well, you got a whole half of the nation to dig in for the next 20 years or 10 years rather, and then we'll see about the other the other half.
Yeah.
All right. Well, listen, Mike. We've this was great discussion, and definitely we shared a lot. With leadership skills, and I mean, we gave things about real estate, but also about the style, the strategy, your vision and how you operate. And this could be literally a good piece. This could be educational for anyone who's learning business or trying to get into real estate or just write any type of company. And as a matter of fact, just because some of the stuff that you said can be duplicated, doesn't matter what industry, it's the same concept. You use your way. It is totally different from the traditional way, and that's, I think, the next generation of thought leaders. Because I just had a show, and it was about thought leaders and being innovative and different. So this is you. You really are a depiction of what that looks like in real time, and with a proven model that is actually in effect. So, Mike, any last words of wisdom to our audiences?
One interesting thing I've learned is that so many of us are afraid to try something new or to push the bounds because we're fearful that we're going to be bad at it. And what's interesting is that is normal. That's human nature, right? We start off this earth, we can't walk, we can't talk, we can't read and write. It's terrible, but it's normal. That's the process, right? But what happens to us when we get later in life is we start to think, well, I don't want to start something unless I can be great at it. The lesson I've learned is that you need to be comfortable with being terrible at first. That's the normal process, but it's in experimenting, trying, growing through that pain of being bad that helps you become amazing in that field. So my word of wisdom is, if there's something you want to jump into and start, don't let perfection hold you back. You'll be much better recognizing it'll be bad to start, and you'll grow from there.
All right, that's power. And I think that's a mistake that many people that have a vision, they don't start it, they don't pursue it because they want everything to be ready and all the elements in place before they get started. And most of the top people will tell you, start first, then figure out the rest.
Yeah,
you got to get started somehow. So Mike, thank you so much for being with us. It's really it was fun, it was great, very informative, very educational. And inspirational, I would say. So thank you so much. And folks, I hope you enjoyed, today's show. It's a little different. We talk business more, and it's in the real estate. And by the way, if you, from a health perspective, I did say this. I just want to close with this. You need to have a place to live so you can have peace of mind, and you need to be able to have an environment that is accommodating and nice and appealing. And then everything else, the amenities can make a difference in your health and physical and mental and physical. So that's important. So there's always an impact of everything that we do from a business perspective to our health. And I've always had this question like, well, you're a health guy, and that most of your shows are health. How do you dabble into the business world and all the stuff? And I always say this: there is nothing in this world that does not affect our health physically, mentally, or spiritually. So therefore, it's all game. All right. All right, folks. We'll talk soon. New day, new show, new guest, new topic. Bye for now.